Hi everyone, this is just a short lecture going over sort of the basics of APA style. After we take a look at some of the information in the slides here, I have sort of a just a short document that looks at some of the basics of APA style. I'll show you that. And this stuff is all available to you on UB Learns if you want it. So what is APA? APA is short for the American Psychological Association. Now, you should note that there are two APAs, two organizations with the acronym APA. One is obviously the American Psychological Association, and they publish the publication manual that we all are probably familiar with. The other APA is the American Psychiatric Association, and they publish the DSM, which is sort of the other document book that social workers use pretty regularly. So occasionally you hear people talk about the big APA and the little APA. The big APA is the American Psychological Association. The little APA is the American Psychiatric Association. That's not information that you'll encounter in our class, but just something to file away in the back of your mind if you ever hear people talk about the big APA and the little APA. At any rate, what we're talking about here is really the publication manual of the American Psychological Association. It covers just about all of the aspects of writing and publishing in the social sciences. It is the style convention that social work uses. Lots of other disciplines use it as well. There are other sort of citation styles, Chicago, MLA, MLA is Modern Language Association, Turabian is actually very similar to Chicago. They, however, they're not used in social work. So what's used in social work is APA. So if you were trained or have some familiarity with some of the other citation styles, you can sort of you don't have to worry about accessing that information. If you never were trained or familiarized yourself with those other citation styles, then you have nothing to worry about because they're not what we use. Now, the 7th edition of the APA manual was released in 2019, and that effectively makes the 6th edition obsolete. There are some important changes. In general, it actually makes the 7th edition is actually made writing a little bit easier. And so what I'm showing you here in this short video is generally consistent with what's talked about in the 7th edition. So that's why this introductory video is why I'm making it. Anyway, APA is also known as an author date system, and so that's the information that goes in the parenthetical cites, the author's name and the date of publication. And then, of course, a reader can use that author date information to check the full reference in the references list and access that paper if she was looking for more information. So let me adjust the screen here so everything is visible to you. So the most relevant section for sort of graduate student papers are chapters 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. Now, not everything in those chapters is relevant, and you'll be reading some of these chapters as part of the reading for our course, so that you're familiar with it. But in general, these are sort of the chapters with which it would be good to be familiar with. So what do I look for in terms of APA? What elements am I looking for in a paper? So the font should be Times New Roman. It should be a 12-point size. Everything should be double spaced. There's no need for extra spaces or anything less than a double space anywhere. The references should start on a new page. There should be headings and subheadings, which I'll show you in the example paper here in a second. Headings and subheadings used throughout the paper to sort of organize the paper itself. and then 1-inch margins on all 4 sides of the document. The 1-inch margins is not always the default option in Microsoft Word, so you may need to fiddle with that if depending on what your computer settings are. Do you need to include an abstract? For my classes, the answer is no. For other classes, that's at the discretion of the instructor. I would check with your instructor or check the syllabus. But just to be clear, in my classes, an abstract is not necessary. I wouldn't penalize you if you did include one, but I just don't think you need to spend your time writing one. I'd rather you spend your time in the concentrating on sort of the body of the paper and not writing an abstract. So a couple of helpful spots in the APA manual that I think are useful. There are example papers on pages 50 to 65. On page 48, there's a chart showing the different levels of headings. Again, I'm going to show you those in a second. The couple of pages around 253 is a discussion of citations and quoting and when to cite, that kind of thing. As I said in the introductory video, I discourage you from using quotes in this class. My advice is to look at sort of synthesizing and integrating information from the sources that you read and creating sort of your own narrative. I've got some videos about that, I think, that I will post later. And then, of course, if you have questions or concerns about writing without quotes, you're welcome to get in touch with me. And then 2 other spots that I find helpful. One is on page 266, and that shows how to handle citing sources that have multiple authors. And then on pages 314 to 316, there's a list of sources that are often cited. I think it's useful to locate the particular kind of source you're trying to cite or write into a reference list. I think it's easier to look in that list than it is in the appendix. Last thing we're going to talk about before we look at the example paper here is, when do you cite? Well, the simple answer is you cite whenever someone else's writing has influenced what you are saying in your paper. And so in a graduate level paper, what this means is that you're often citing pretty frequently, in some cases just about every sentence. And there are going to be times when a single sentence might have 2 or 3 citations in it. So let me, that's the end of that. Let me switch over to the example paper real quick and I'll restart the video. All right, so this is just an example paper here. Now, one of the things that the 7th edition of the APA manual got rid of was a running head. So if you're used to including one, you're welcome to. Again, I wouldn't penalize you if you did include it, but you don't have to. And note that there is a page number that's included on the first page as well. The only other information that's really needed on the front page is a title of the paper, your name, a name of the class, and the date. You can include other information if you want to. Some people include the instructor's name. For me, you don't need to do that. As long as you have these 4 pieces of information in this order, that's fine with me. Again, note, even on this title page here, note that the heading is Times New Roman. There are other fonts that APA considers acceptable. Times New Roman is actually really easy to read, and that's why I prefer it. It's because I have a lot of things to grade, a lot of things to read. It doesn't fatigue the eyes at the same level that other fonts do. So I do ask that students use Times New Roman as the font for the papers that they submit. So I mentioned headings a few times over the course of this video. You always start with a level 1 heading. You can think of headings as sort of signposts in your paper. They alert the reader to what's coming up. Now, if you need to subdivide a particular section, you go to a level 2 heading. And there are such things as level 3 and level 4 headings, and that's if you need to further subdivide a particular section. I've put a sample reference list down here. Note that everything is double spaced within a reference and between a reference. The form of justification, this is called justified. This is a left justified style here. That's where there's sort of a straight line, or the text is organized along a straight line here, and then it returns back to the left whenever it needs to over here. This is the correct kind of justification to use. There are other styles, but they would sort of fall outside of the bounds of APA. So I will I'll leave it here. This document, as I said, is available to you on UB Learns if you want to take a look. And then, of course, if you have questions about APA or citations or anything like that, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks for watching.